don't be overwhelmed, have an open mind, and then whether it's us or whoever else, find a broker or a person you can trust to have a further discussion on some of these topics. We just want what's best for you. So if you trust them, we respect that.
Welcome to another installment of the Next Gen AI Case Study Series. In this episode, we have today Bobby Mickelson, who is a business development executive at M3 Insurance. He joined the company in November 2022, bringing a wealth of experience in insurance and business development. His role involves educating the business community about M3's comprehensive services, which include insurance, risk management, employee benefits, and retirement planning. Mickelson holds a bachelor's degree in communication studies from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and is a licensed life, health, property, and casualty agent in Wisconsin. And I'm excited to welcome him to the show. Bobby, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, appreciate you having it on. I'm looking forward to covering various topics. Been in the industry for 7 years, so I'll look forward to kind of going over some of the things I've learned in my time in the industry and how it's kind of changing and evolving, and then just discussing various topics.
Cool. So let's start with a little bit more of an in-depth background of who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up with M3.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. So I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. For a lot of people don't know where Eau Claire, Wisconsin is. So we say it's about an hour 20 east of the Twin Cities area, town community, about 100,000. So born and raised in the area. So that's where I hail. I've spent most of my time in the industry in this area. I worked in a small town called Hammond, Wisconsin, which is next to Hudson, Wisconsin, which is kind of right on the Wisconsin-Minnesota border. So I began my career out of college at UW Eau Claire, at a company called Rural Mutual Insurance, where basically I did farm insurance, personal lines insurance, such as home and auto, things of that nature. Had some success there for about 4.5 years' time. Had a split office business partner, one full-time customer service representative and one part-time customer service representative. But love the company. It's a great organization, but it was kind of limited in the fact at a young age where you only could write. It's a captive direct writer, so we only could offer real mutual products. And I kind of wanted something more for myself. So from there, a couple business partners approached me, and I actually began my own brokerage, which is like a smaller version of M3, where we did employee benefits, personal lines, business insurance, not so much on the retirement planning side, but had heard of M3 throughout my time in the insurance industry. So when they reached out to me, I had to check out the organization and fell in love with the culture and the people. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Awesome. So taking on the role of business development, I'm sure is a bit of a departure from the front lines. What kind of transition was that like? What was that experience like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a lot different versus, when I had my own brokerage, I would basically I'd write the policy, service some of the policy. I kind of, like you said, be in that front line and kind of be in the weeds on things. So, it was a challenge, both positive and negative, I would say. More positive. The negatives really being that I'm very hands-on. I very much care for my clientele. So not having that hands-on approach, being more hands-off and not really doing that servicing or writing the policies was a little bit of a struggle for me at times. But ultimately, I'm a relationship person. So what's primarily my role now is to build and foster those relationships. So I really enjoy that part of it. So kind of getting through that weird transition of being more hands-off per se. It's going well now, and I still get to do what I love best, which is, hear people's stories, build those relationships, learn different businesses, learn different industries, and there are things I never would without being in the role I am.
Coming from the perspective of being the frontline guy and genuinely caring about each of the individuals that you're serving, and then moving to a place where you actually have to zoom out now and you're more of a bird's eye view of everything. I'm sure that afforded you some insight into how to function up here, being in the thick of it all, and then zooming out. Can you talk to some of that wisdom that you gained from being on the front lines?
Yeah, absolutely. It gave me appreciation for a lot of people that have roles at this company. Like a lot of our CSRs, we call them, or account managers that really do a lot of the policy changes and do a lot of the certificates of insurance, some insurance jargon for you. Because that stuff is not easy and it's really not that fun, to be honest with you. Especially on quick turnaround times. For example, somebody within the construction industry that needs certificate insurance so they can begin a job, right? So some of those quick turnarounds, some of those things of that nature, it gave me appreciation for what they have to do, as well as, what we call client executives, which essentially are like our sales agents, and we're very niche oriented. So somebody that works in, again, going back to the construction real estate sector, the coverages that they have to learn about, keep up to date. And they're the ones really that have to deliver those rough increases that we're seeing in the insurance industry, especially from the property perspective, and understanding their pain and what their struggles and what they have to do. I think that's really helped me be patient and help. And I've been thankful that honestly, I don't have to do a lot of that, because the way this industry is heading in the hard market, it's not easy. So yeah, I think it really gave me a profound appreciation of what they go through day to day and what they do.
I'm sure you had some level of expectation coming into the role as business developer, in terms of what your responsibilities would be and what you would be taking care of. Some of those obvious, other ones not so. What kind of unexpected things came up when you entered into that position?
That's a great question. So I would say for me, it was kind of expected, but at the same time, it's still kind of unexpected on a learning curve for me, is the development of a relationship, right? That I think that a lot of people, including myself, I'd actually argue most people really strive for instant gratification. So taking a step back, and the type of opportunities our brokerage in particular in my role that I chase after on the mid-market side. So you think of like a insurance premium over 100,000 or employee benefit case over 50 lives, that unless you already have an established relationship, which many of us don't, just have 10 to 20 plus businesses we can walk into with great relationships and BOR or write the business, is meeting a person and really being patient and then letting that relationship develop. So that's been a struggle. So I think that for me too, maybe not so much very unexpected, but still kind of a learning curve and getting used to, is the amount of time you spend kind of outside those business hours, right? Like at a happy hour, or getting up early and doing a coffee, or doing a Saturday nonprofit event, or doing, a gala that night. So some things of that nature. I knew that with this role, some of that would come, but the amount of time on a weekly basis really you have to dedicate that to, I think is very important to be successful.
I imagine it's a lot like, I'm going to draw an analogy here. So as a president, or before you become a president, you're campaigning, right? There's things that people see that aren't working well. And so you campaign to be the guy that's going to change those things. And so moving from the front lines into into a role with a little bit more authority, what were some of the things that you noticed that you wanted to like quickly change or quickly address to really make an impact in the business?
That's a great question. I would say that for me, that's a good one. For me, things that I wanted to change is a transparency. I think was big, right? Transparency is huge. So I would say that most people that know the industry, even some that don't, especially on the employee benefit side, we get kind of a bad rap for taking big or large commissions and not being transparent about it, right? I know there's transparency laws that you have to provide customers, but that can get looked over very easily. So I think for me, learning this role and coming from front lines to here is working with the team of people that I have around me, and then making sure the prospect or client understands, one, what we're being paid, and two, being transparent about it, and then kind of proving our worth and giving them like a list of services and what we could provide them. Because I just don't really like that narrative. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there aren't brokerages or people that don't do that, but we don't want to be that. We want to change that narrative. It's just an icky feeling.
Yeah, and I imagine that the transparency itself is a bit of a double-edged sword too, in that sometimes if you're honest enough, you kind of deter people from wanting to work with you because they find out things that they didn't want to find out. Did you have that experience, or if you didn't, how did you avoid that, getting bit by the other side of the sword?
See, that's a funny that you asked that. So we actually met with the prospect. I obviously won't mention any names. So we met with the prospect last week, and there's something in the benefits world called a 5,500, where basically if they're over 100 lives on a plan, you can go on to a system, you can see who the broker is, what the TPA, which is basically somebody who administers the claims, and you can see what the broker is charging for a commission, right? So we went on a 5,500 before meeting with this prospect, and we saw they're being charged arguably up to 4 times a fair market value of what they should be paying a broker. So they came out and asked us a question like, oh, what do you typically charge? It's like, we'll typically charge this amount. And you could see kind of look on their faces. It was like they're almost shocked. Like we shocked them the wrong way, right? That, there's a thing called price shocking people, but it went the opposite way. Like, whoa, like, why are you being so honest? Like, why are you so cheap? And I think it honestly did more harm than good in that scenario. We'll see what happens, how it plays out. But just seeing the look on their faces and shocking them the other way, it was unique, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's somebody that I follow very closely, Ryan Levesque. He did this whole thing called the Ask campaign, and the premise behind this was that instead of making things up as you go, you literally go to the people that you're trying to serve and you ask them some very pertinent questions to be able to get the information you need so that you can set the pricing at a place where, because if it's too high, people don't want to buy because they feel like they can't afford it. If it's too low, they don't want to buy because they don't feel like it's going to be enough. And there's this sweet spot that's right in the middle. So I love how maybe that was on purpose, or maybe you kind of stumbled into that, but isn't that such an important element to not to overlook when it comes to having those relationships with your clients?
I think you nailed it. So we never want to, it's a theme at our brokerage, right? We never want to be the cheapest, but obviously we don't want to gouge people. So I think what you're saying, like that sweet spot it's so true. Because there's other brokers, other people that come in that will give you the cheapest price, but cheap doesn't always mean best, right? You kind of get what you pay for. But at the same time, it's like you said, I think you said it earlier, it's a double-edged sword. So, you don't want to overcharge people because we get what I was saying before. We have a bad narrative of doing that, especially in the benefit side of things. But at the same time, yeah, we don't want to completely undercut competition. That's not good. Because we're industry professionals. We want to make sure we get what we paid for, and we have a business to operate. We're a brokerage, insurance carriers. They're in business too, right? So I think you nailed it there. It's kind of a sweet spot of, we call say fair market value, right? That's our favorite thing to say.
Yeah, some people will go and buy a T-shirt at Walmart for $7 and being very pleased that they beat the system, right? They got something that's very affordable. But then, somebody else might go to Gucci and buy a $3,000 shirt made of a very similar material, and literally they're only paying for the brand name. So value is in the eye of the beholder. But our job, I imagine that part of your job is to be able to communicate that value to the people that you're intending to serve. So in that atmosphere of proper messaging when communicating with clients, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in that front facing marketing stuff, and what are some of the things that you guys are like really nailing?
Yeah, I love that question. So one of the things we like to do here is we like to separate the carrier and broker decision, right? So I think that we often get confused by many prospective clients that they think we're all the same. When in fact, we actually sit on the side of the table as the prospect or client, right? We argue on their behalf, and we use our, stature within the insurance industry, because we've been so successful as a brokerage, to make sure we get the best premium, the best deal possible for that prospective client. But we've had multiple people and multiple businesses get mad at us and basically say we're just stealing their money when they're paying premiums. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like, no, we're actually on your side here. We don't dictate what the carrier charges for a rate. We just make sure that we get you the coverages necessary. So God forbid something happens, you're covered at the fairest price possible. So that's one of our favorite things to do in terms of that. So that's one of the values we argue. We have a lot of in-house resources that a lot of brokerages don't have. that we can offer different prospective clients as well, such as our own risk management team, our own underwriting teams, things of that nature. That's, again, separate from the carrier, that they have experience on the carrier side, so they know how those rates are dictated and what those services cost. But we keep them in-house, so that, again, it can be another tool and essentially our clients or prospects about.
So I guess there's two ways of developing the business in terms of acquiring customers and attracting prospects into the business. One of those ways is the passive way, where you rely on foot traffic, maybe, past a brick and mortar location, or people who are kind of Googling or searching, and then they come across your business. What are you guys doing in the way of more of the proactive stuff, where you're actually like putting material out there to attract those people in?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a quick joke with that. Within a business development role, typically people ask, like, so your business development, what do you do? And I joke, and I'm half serious when I say this too, is that I said I do coffee, I do lunch, I do happy hour, and I golf. Right. And it's like, some people laugh, like, no, seriously. But like, seriously, What do you do? I'm gonna say, well, I'm half serious. Like, it's building the networking, getting out, meeting different people, meeting somebody that can connect me with X business. And then that same event, maybe I meet another person that connect me with business Y, right? So getting out in the community is one way. And we're big on community too. We have our own foundation. We've given away actually I think it's over $2 million the last 10 years. So the philanthropy piece is big to us, giving back. But again, just obviously, it's now getting, all of my business is going to be generated from networking, doing those things I said, like happy hours, golf, etc. I'm still a little old school in the fact that I'm not afraid to pick up the phone and make some cold calls and follow up with some voicemails and emails, stuff like that nature. So I think for me, I'm still relatively new to the business development role. As I get more tenured, I think some of our more tenured business development people would argue they do a little less of that. But I still think that old school approach too, of just picking up the phone and playing the analytic numbers, law of averages game, can be effective too. So I think that it's you kind of have to attack it all angles. But as I mentioned, as you get more experience, you do a little less of the old school approach. But I do think that should be in everybody's repertoire, especially beginning out. I think it needs to be a large part.
Well, on that note, what are some of the technologies that you guys are leveraging that help you with that customer relationship management?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say number one, ZoomInfo is huge for me. You can go on. I think a lot of people like to use it, but you can look up any business. It'll give you a rough company revenue range, rough employee count. Most of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, it's up to date on who the CEO is, who the CFO is, HR manager. A lot of the time, you can get their direct numbers down to even their personal emails and cell phones, but especially almost all the time, their business email or direct line. So it's kind of leveraging some of those tools. XYwav is another big one, which is kind of like a 5,500 version on a steroid. It's kind of a combination of any 5,500 benefit site you'd see along with ZoomInfo, because it has some of the decision makers on there too. And if they're large enough, who their current broker is and how long they've had, have that brokerage, or how long they've had certain lines of coverage, all that good stuff.
Yeah, those are some really powerful tools. And I imagine a lot of the stuff that you're doing then is manual. I don't know the other word, like any other word for it. It's like you actually got to go do the work. Are you guys exploring anything in the way of automations and AI currently?
Yeah, we are actually. We call it applied intelligence within our brokerage. But okay. It's gonna automate a lot of what we have to do. So it takes some of the features of like a chat GPT, and in terms of type me up a prospect email, and I want these key features in that prospect email, and then I'll spit it back. And just like a chat GPT, right? You can teach it like, oh, make this more personal, make this more concise, add this, take this off, and it learns as it goes. So I'm big on that artificial intelligence. We call it applied intelligence piece. It saved me a lot of time on follow-up emails, or if I want to do like a mass email prospect campaign of coming up with a template so I can just spit it out. But yeah, I would say that automation, that the artificial intelligence piece I would argue it saves me anywhere from 3 to 5 hours a week of work. So you do that over a month, it's quite a bit of time. I mean, in terms of, or if we get RFP requests for proposals, I could even have it type me up a template along those lines too. So yeah, I'm big on that. I think it's the way of the future, and I think it's efficient.
And so with the technologies that you're using, I heard you mention GPT as one of the tools. Fantastic tool. I use it daily.
Yep.
You really got to get good at asking what you want the right way. But once you get it dialed in and you know what you're looking for, it becomes a really, really useful tool.
Yep.
So I get a sense that the angle here is just looking for third-party solutions that really fit what you guys are doing. Are you developing anything internal, or is that kind of the path that you're taking right now?
Yep. So we have our own version of the Chat GPT that's in-house. That's probably more, I guess, not that Chat GPT, I still use 3.5, but not that it isn't, I guess, adequate for doing things from the insurance sector. But I think ours is going to be more specialized just on insurance. For example, too, we have a renewal and we can scan in the coverages and send it to our version of a Chat GPT too and said, are we missing any coverages in this area? Are we missing any coverage? What would you recommend we change? So review this to see if that exclusion's in a policy. So instead of one of our sales representatives going through and taking, I don't know, 30 minutes an hour going through the whole policy, they can put in the system, ask the necessary question that they might have to talk about, discuss the renewal that might be an area of concern or might be an area they're looking to add on. And again, you add that up over all the clients we have, that's a lot of time set.
Yeah. In terms of trends in the industry right now as it relates to this sort of thing, what are you noticing across the board?
Property market is awful. It's terrible. A lot of frustrations with that. The auto market is hardening as well. In my sector, I guess in my area, I should say, we have some of the highest healthcare spending in the nation. I think we're third or fourth, and we just had another provider, a nonprofit provider, go out that was offering cheap care. So that's a mess. So I'd say the two struggles I'm seeing, particularly in my area, but I would argue the property market's hard just about anywhere you go. So that's a struggle. You have a lot of carriers pulling out of certain property sectors that don't want anything to do with it. But it's tough because, again, we talked about this early in the conversation that insurance carriers are businesses too, right? So I feel for them. Obviously, I feel for the manufacturer or the contractor or whatever too. I feel for both sides. But with general inflation in our economy, with the cost of materials, the cost of vehicles nowadays, what the insurance carriers really don't have another option. Like if they have to replace a vehicle that's $10,000 more than it was a couple of years ago, well, they have to take more premium because they have to protect themselves. So the property and auto market is awful on the property and casualty side. The benefits side, I can just speak for Western Wisconsin. We're struggling with provider issues. The cost of care has gone astronomical. And it's too bad because everybody deserves to have quality health care, but so we're doing a lot on the self-funding side to try to solve some of that issues. But yeah, provider issues where I'm from are a major struggle. I
gather that you are aware or at least connected to this in a very close proximity. I get the sense that you deal with this kind of stuff on a frequent enough basis. I'm curious to know if you've given it any thought in terms of like what needs to be done to correct that. Do you have any insight there?
Yeah, so I would say on the employee benefit side of my location, that provider issue, we're fortunate enough, we're starting to finally see an influx of direct primary care / clinics. So that's really alleviating a lot of the issues, right? Instead of the major hospital like a Mayo who charges a pretty penny, granted it's great care, but charges a pretty penny for a lot of their services, that not everything has to go there. So we're seeing specialized care clinics that can do some ultrasounds, that can do an MRI for $500, $600 versus, $5,000, or do an ultrasound. So we're getting like these specialized care clinics with a few doctors where it's literally a third or fourth of the cost many times that a lot of these employers can put on their benefits plan that can access. So not everything has to go through a Mayo or Marshfield at an astronomical cost, in my opinion. On the property and casualty side, it's a little more difficult. I just think that having a broker that's going to be proactive at least 6 to 7 months pre-renewal to start gauging the marketplace, to putting feelers out, is really the best you can do, right? Otherwise, you're kind of just getting stuck in the mud. Or if you're trying to do it last minute, it's going to be tough to do because that market's hard, man. It really is.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes that are happening, and not just in the way of technology, but in the way that we are interacting with big business. Just generally as a whole, there's a generational shift now. New people who are coming into positions of power who weren't previously, who have observed ongoing and continuous problems. And so it's good, Bobby, that you've given it as much thought as you have to be able to at least make some suggestions. I love to see people in business being proactive about these challenges and looking for solutions that are going to be win-win-win, where everybody benefits. It's not just the customer, it's not just you, but it's like the community as a whole. And the idea that you touched on, that a lot of your business is because you're so woven into the fabric of that community. What are you doing in the way of community development that helps kind of service that beyond beers and golf?
I think that our office in Eau Claire here, and this is a pretty industry standard, or I would at least say for us, M3 standard to give back. But we do a lot of volunteering, like the Red Cross, United Way. We're big into those organizations. Myself personally, I have a passion for diversity. We struggle with some diversity issues in our community, so helping service like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Boys and Girls Club. Working on another organization that's actually La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is south of here, decent sized Wisconsin city, bringing another African American around organization in the community too. So I think that we call the people who work at M3 M3ers. And I think that it takes a special person to really be an M3er, because one of our core pillars and foundation, I generally mean this, is to having a want to making your community a better place, like you said. And obviously serving it from the insurance perspective is awesome and coming up with solutions there, but it's got to be more than that. You got to be giving back. You got to be helping those less fortunate. You got to, and again, for me, the diversity piece, I think that our community has a long way to go. So kind of trying to help fill that void is near and dear to my heart as well. So
To kind of wrap things up here, Bobby, I'm curious to get your insight into, what are some of the goals or things that you guys are aiming at now for the future of insurance? Is there something or anything notable that excites you about the future?
yeah, and it's kind of already started, but I would say like disruption is what we like to call it, disrupting what's been going on. And what I mean by that for us is one of the main ways we're disrupting is by on property and casualty side and the employee benefit side is getting companies that can do it. And this is actually going down to businesses and the smaller scale businesses is going self-funded. So instead of just giving all your premium dollars back to the carrier, taking kind of control and owning your insurance program more, because we like to say it's like owning or renting a house, right? You rent a house. Obviously, you own the contents within the house. You have some control, but you don't actually physically own the property. You don't have the say in a lot of what's going on. Well, that's kind of like, the insurance world too. Like you can control your coverage a little bit, but you don't really officially own the policy because they can give you a 20, 30, 40% renewal increase, right? Versus on the self-funding side, you can kind of set the budget. Obviously, there's still a premium to be paid, just like a mortgage, right? But you can kind of control a lot of the facets more so in terms of, okay, well, I don't want this. I'm going to take this out. I have more buying power because I'm teaming up with, if I'm doing a captive route, which is a sector of self-funding, I'm teaming up with other businesses to have more lives on a policy, to have more buying power. And you can kind of control that own narrative more. And then the result of that is you're not dishing out the 20, 30, 40% increases. They're more like flat. I've even seen negative to 10% if you've really had a bad year. So that's kind of one of the ways we're doing it. That self-funded piece and disrupting what's been going on, the traditional insurance sector, we call it.
That's so interesting that you frame it that way. I have a really good friend and business associate that I work for who is an advocate for the infinite banking concept. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but for those who aren't, very quickly, it's this idea of a whole life dividend paying insurance policy that you own, and that acts as an asset that now allows you to replace the banking function for your own family or trust or what have you. And so what you're explaining sounds very similar to that in terms of like you buy your policy and now that policy is an asset that you can now use to help grow your business. And is that am I on the mark there or am I
You
missing
nailed
it?
it. Term life insurance, I definitely say is renting versus whole life. Yeah, you get cash value and you can use it as a bank. It's very similar to self-funding versus the typical fully insured on the benefit side or traditional policy from any standard carrier on the PNC side. Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
This is wonderful to hear that you're innovating in such a useful way for people. And I only hope that this message reaches the right people so that they can really truly see what it is that you're up to. You've been very generous with your time, Bobby, and your wisdom. So I just want to say I'm grateful for that. If somebody wanted to um, actually, before we wrap this up, I did have one other question. I always try
Yeah.
to kind of end things on a bit of a high note here in terms of being inspirational. If there was a piece of advice that you could offer somebody who is kind of exploring these topics that we've talked about today, what would your piece of advice be, Bobby?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a couple things. I would say this is a lot, like especially when I got into the self-funding part and all that stuff. So I would just say like don't be overwhelmed, have an open mind, and then whether it's us or whoever else, find a broker or a person you can trust to have a further discussion on some of these topics. We're big about that. Well, we always tell people that whether it's us or somebody else, one of our competitors, we just want what's best for you. So if you trust them, we respect that. So finding somebody you can trust that can have a deeper conversation or introduce you to the right people that can have a high level conversation. And then don't absorb this and try to do everything. Don't run too fast, I guess, the best thing I could say. Some of these topics, some things we discussed, they take some time to implement. They take some time to learn. So don't run too fast. I know it can be exciting. I know it can buck the trend of traditional insurance, but it's important to understand, have somebody you can trust to kind of help you navigate it through, and then take it all in stride from there.
Yeah, find a valuable guide that you trust who is knowledgeable in it, and then take your time and allow them to steer you through it at your pace. I think that's such incredible advice, Bobby. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to work with you or pick your brain further, how would one go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active. My cell phone, 715-559-7544. I'm more than happy to have a conversation, just educate or get somebody on our M3 team that would educate as well. Otherwise, you can reach out. My email is Bobby, BOBBY Mickelson, M as in Michael, ICKELSON at M3ins.com. So those are the two best ways. And I'm more than happy to just be a resource to people and then expunge some knowledge. And then if I don't know, get them to the right person on our team.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. And if you wanted to get in touch with me or my team, it's nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next one.